Good morning. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the NFT morning. Today is 5th of November, actually, a very special day for a lot of people, but for us especially because this is Paris Photo, and this is why we are doing a special edition at 4 p.m. Because, for people following us, usually NFT morning is in French at 9 a.m. in the morning, but we have one of the most exciting week happening for digital art in Paris right now with this digital sector of Paris Photo curated by Nina Rohrs. And so this morning we had the chance to have basically Object.com and Mimi and Green Gallery to present already, what they will exhibit in Paris Photo. Tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, we have much more galleries and artists that will come. But today, I'm super happy and excited because, as you can see, I'm not alone. And there is also an artist waiting in backstage right now. But, I am with Alejandro Cartagena, founder of Fellowship, actually much more than this. How are you, Alejandro?
Good, John. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you for coming. So yeah, just so you are exhibiting for the second time at Paris Photo. So you're coming back this year, and
Third time.
third
Third
time.
time. Yes.
Oh, okay. So I think we have to talk about it because also it's making the link.
Yeah.
Basically, it's making the link, because just for people who don't know, the first official digital arts sector was introduced last year by Paris Photo with Nina Rohrs curation.
Yeah.
But Alejandro, before creating one of the most important AI gallery slash platform. I don't know how to name Fellowship, basically. Uh, you will explain us. But
Sure.
before creating that, you are an artist first, and also you have a background in photography, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
Maybe you can
Photography
some.
and visual studies. So yeah, I mean, this is our third year in Paris Photo. The first year we presented a mix of photography and generative art. We did the Dmitry Cherniak pieces that were an homage to Laszlo Moholy-Nagy. They were generative art pieces printed on silver gelatin. And then we also presented the NFTs of August Sander. We presented the NFTs of Guy Bourdin. We presented Christina Demidel from Magnum. So the first year, it was kind of our presentation of photography as NFTs. So we were the only gallery presenting NFTs that year. That was 2022, and the whole booth was a mixture of NFTs and physical objects. So we've been pushing this idea of opening up the NFT space and crossing over to a broader range of collectors, and the Paris Photo Fair has been an excellent place to spread the word of this dual collecting experience that can be had now with NFTs. On the second Paris Photo, we definitely went into pushing a little bit more of AI works, but we still presented photography and with Joel Meyerowitz and Yatrida. But that was the first presentation that we did of a line draw by Elman Mansimov. We did a big presentation. That was the first time that it was exhibited as works of art by a scientist. Elman, who was a 19-year-old kid doing his PhD on computer vision, invented the first text to image model back in 2015 when he was in Toronto in Canada. And that was we were still not part of the digital sector. We were part of the principal fair, and then this is our first time as part of the digital sector of the
Ah,
with Nina.
I
Yeah.
didn't know that. Wow. And so that's pretty interesting. And of course, yeah, just to explain, the episode is also about our guest that will come on stage, Trevor Paglen, with the Evolved Hallucination
Yes.
work, that you will present at Paris Photos. But I'm just interested, by in terms of background, you are also an artist, and
Yes.
you've been also working in the photography world, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
Can you just tell us a bit more? Basically, what is
Sure.
the connection between all of that? Is it like art and technology, basically, or how do you see it?
So I've been fascinated with the idea of visual culture because of what I studied, the idea of why images become important to the world and to us as humans. And art is not the only way that we can think of images being important. And so I've had that like side of my practice. It's more, let's say, in the research and curatorial side, but not too much in my practice. My practice is much more photographic, maybe a little like I've in the past few years I've worked with found images and done some projects around found images, but with the advent of AI and I sometimes pinch myself that I effed up and I wasn't paying enough attention when this thing started to come out, because it's perfectly what I'm fascinated with, and it's the idea of how images can shape the way that we see the world. And when we think of AI images, I think that the initial problem, and again, I pinch myself that I didn't pay attention in this way. The rudimentary aesthetic and surface of AI images made me kind of repel them and not understand how to see them. And I sometimes and why I'm so passionate about AI and AI images is because I can imagine 200 years ago when Niepce presented his image, his photographic image, and it was a very rudimentary image that looked like shit, but it was a proof of concept of freezing images through light and shadow on with silver and copper. And so I don't want to let that pass, and I don't want I want to be part of how we think of these images, because they will inevitably be important in the way that we see the world into the future. Just like photography is a tangent in the history of images, like we were going one way and suddenly photography came and it created this mess of how to think of what is an image and what is art in the age of the mechanical reproduction. Suddenly we have this new type of image making technology, and I feel that we are not paying enough attention. And this is one of the reasons that I'm so fascinated about Trevor's practice, because he was there kind of shouting out, hey, let's pay attention to these things. They are going to become so commonplace in the next few years. And, I didn't understand what he was saying back then. And now here we are, almost 10 years after the advent of generative AI, where it is an everyday conversation, generative AI image making. And so it's really intriguing for me to work with somebody who was there trying to put voice in things that the rest of us weren't paying attention to, and he was there tinkering and moving and experimenting. So it's a complete opportunity, like honor and a great opportunity for me as an artist and as a thinker, like a visual thinker, to be working with somebody like
Yeah.
Trevor.
Now that's a perfect introduction, and I think it's time also to welcome you on stage, Trevor. Hey, yeah, come on! It's really happy and excited to have you there.
I'm
You know,
happy to be here. Thanks so much
yeah,
for having me, John, and awesome to see you, Ali.
yeah, it's an opportunity. Is it just, is it the first time you are exhibited in Paris Photo, or you have also an experience with this show?
I've exhibited here a lot in the past, but this is my first time in person. So
Okay.
Mm,
long time listener, first time caller.
nice.
Okay. That's awesome. So I think also for you, it's exciting to be on the other side. That's super cool. And so I think, it's a perfect introduction, that made Alejandro also. Basically, the question of images that are building the perception that we have,
Mhm,
the perception that, yeah, the way we see the world.
mhm,
And a big focus of your work is also the way actually it's not basically the way the world see the images, but more I would say the way images see the world, or at least
yeah.
machines see the world. Yeah, maybe Alejandro, you can explain a bit more. Just the
Sure.
what making Trevor really also important, as you said, and very early in this phase.
Yeah. So one of the key elements that have stuck with me when I started talking with Trevor was the idea that somehow we were poking and peeking into machines talking to machines through images. And what does that mean to visual culture? We have this, it's a great opportunity to expand the way that we think of images and how we elaborate ideas through images. But it's also a big, what does it mean when machines can talk to machines via images? Like, what does that mean to the way that we've thought of art, the way that we've thought of visual culture through the web, through books? What it's challenging a lot of like preconceptions of what how images work. So that for me is like the core of my fascination with evolved hallucinations and a lot of your practice, Trevor. And maybe this is a good opening to like where do you come from in terms of this interest in understanding images? Not
Mm.
only AI, because you've been thinking about these things prior to working with AI and machine learning. Yeah, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking about this stuff for a long time at this point, I guess. I guess just really briefly, my kind of creative or artistic journey or intellectual journey kind of began uh, after 9/11 in the US and the creation of this war on terror, this global, largely secret, largely invisible war that nonetheless was so constitutive of American society and political life. And I was trying to figure out, how do you make images of this? So was doing things like going out to the desert and trying to photograph, secret military installations or exercises from very long distances using telescopes and different kind of custom equipment I'd try to figure out to take these long range photos. I was traveling all over the world, like hunting down secret prisons and, really just trying to create images that would help me to visualize that war. Fast forward a little bit, a guy named Ed Snowden goes to my friend Laura Poitras, and she was a filmmaker. She'd also been interested in these kinds of questions, and she knew that I had this background of trying to research things that were difficult to see, secrecy, military things, infrastructure. She asked me to look at those documents with her and to work on a film that became Citizen 4. And again, try to see the things that were being described in these documents, things that were largely invisible. How do you understand them? How do you make images that show these landscapes in that broader sense? Now, going through those documents, one of the things you realize is that at that time, the NSA had a problem, which is they're collecting so much information from every corner of the universe, literally the universe, because they're spying on satellites and space probes and stuff like that. And how do they process it all? so they were describing early versions of AI and machine learning that they were trying to implement to sift through this huge amount of data. And I got really interested in that. And I thought, what's happening here? What's happening here? We're seeing a shift happening from the communications infrastructures that we use, from being kind of like passive tubes that things travel through, to things that are actively looking at the information inside them and trying to make sense of it. And I had already been interested in computer vision and sort of started running with that, although at that time there was very difficult there wasn't really off-the-shelf tools you could use in the same way that there is now. So we started building a lot of tools in my own studio. And, with the machine learning kind of revolution begins about 2012. And yeah, so we were just basically off to the races, but it really came out of this question of what does it mean to build machines that see and interpret the world for us? And that is a really profound question, because when we're talking about seeing or we're talking about sense making, it's a very squishy business. On one hand, there are physiological things going on when we're looking at something. There's photons coming in and being processed, being focused by lenses in our eyes and, processed by our brains. But it's also profoundly cultural. It's profoundly historical. It's profoundly subjective. Each of us literally sees differently. Each of us, often see something different based on what our expectations are, or even what our memories are. And so how do you build that into a machine, right? Like how do you take this thing that is so squishy and so human and universalize it and quantify it and encode it into autonomous systems? And so I understood intuitively that when you do that, you are always going to be building a particular set of point of views into AI systems or computer vision systems. And I wanted to understand what those were, what were the values, what were the, memories, subjectivities, politics, what have you, that were either consciously or unconsciously being built into computer vision systems.
Yeah. And in that sense, and sorry, John, I have a good follow-up question here. For me, I've seen the project over and over again, and I read your stuff. And is it a fair assessment to some degree this is the use of AI almost as, or the images are almost evidence of your research? Yes, they're art pieces, but they almost feel like, like lab experiments, and you're showing the evidence of the experiment.
I definitely agree with you that the process is very much akin to like lab experiments. Like, what are the weird things that pop out of these systems that we build? I would say they're different than evidence in the sense that evidence is trying to make a true claim about the world, where I'm going through a very similar process, but I'm looking for an allegory, right? So I'm looking for a moment through that empirical process where an image feels like a really powerful metaphor for me. And that's more interesting to me than something that would be evidentiary that you could use in court or something like that.
Yeah. And it feels almost akin to those images that you've been doing of like the secret sites, where it's the mechanical process uh, that you can't ever see it. There's this layer of invisibility that is part of the technical part, and thus it can't be evidence. It stays in this allegorical space, which is very uncomfortable, I think, for some people to see it that way, because it's like, well, is it this or is it that? uh, but it's the beautiful space where we as artists can traverse. And there's culture has deemed that we can spawn these weird space in between images that could be seen as like like factual, but also completely allegorical and metaphoric.
I love the way that you put it there, like making images that are these in between images, or not this or not that, or that refuse to speak themselves, that
Yeah.
refuse to resolve themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Because that, for me, that's the exact opposite of computer vision. That's the exact opposite of AI, which is all about trying to see something and resolve it. And that's what the project came out of, was like with that frustration of this very rigid forms of seeing built into computer
Yeah.
vision and machine learning systems. And so I wanted to think about, there's so many different filters that humans have developed over, history to interpret what it is we're seeing. And if you look at a Renaissance painting of like a skull and an apple and a rose or something like that, it's not about like shit that's on your table. You know what I mean? These are like symbols that are about, life and death and
Yeah.
sin, or whatever. We've always used images in highly allegorical ways, and I would propose that we even do that in our everyday lives unconsciously, right?
Yeah.
And so I wanted to build machine learning models that started from there, that took that as a premise. And so I started building models that were based on poetry or philosophy, or different alternative taxonomies for the interpretation of images, whether that's like Baroque allegory, or whether that's Freudian psychoanalysis. But these
Yeah.
are all these different frameworks that people have used to interpret images. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool if you built AI models that did that? But of course, you kind of break the idea of an AI model when you do that, because you make something that is very deliberately nonsensical in a way, but you're trying to get to this higher register of meaning by doing that.
Oh yeah, that's super interesting, and maybe also it's a good way to introduce actually, yeah, the evolved hallucinations work,
Yeah.
because it's also related to this topic. I believe, trying to, yeah, to have this, these filters, that are making the way we are seeing things, and I think you focused on some of these filters. So yeah, maybe you can tell us more about what you've been trying to do with this work, and I can show also a bit how it looks like.
Yeah, so I mean, the project was begun in around, was done mostly between about 2014, 15. It was first exhibited in 2017, and it was really kind of a simple idea, which was that instead of making models that would say, oh, there's a house plant, or there's a hot dog, or whatever it is, these very one-to-one correspondences that you see in conventional machine learning and computer vision, I wanted to make essentially allegorical models. So I would build a model. I would take a piece of literature. For example, there's one that's based on Dante's Divine Comedy, and would go and like look at the text and say, okay, here's this very allegorical journey that the character goes on, and what are all the things that they see, and how are they interpreting those images that they're seeing. So I'd get a kind of create a taxonomy, like these are all the things that Dante sees, in purgatory and hell and heaven, and let's make a data set based on that, and then we'll train a model that can see, quote unquote, and only see images from that allegorical text, right? And to me, it was just a way of, on one hand, it's a kind of a generative critique of what I call machine realism, which are these very one-to-one relationships between objects and classifications that you see in conventional machine learning. And it was a way to try to imagine ourselves into different worlds, right? It was a way, and kind of a meta commentary on visuality itself. And so some of the taxonomies are quite literally from historical sources. There's one based on Freud's interpretation of dreams. There's these ones based on Dante. There's one based on Dürer's Meisterstiche, his allegorical etchings. And then there's some taxonomies that were just weirder that I just kind of made up. There's one called Monsters of Capitalism that looks out at the world, and everything that it sees is a monster that historically has been associated with a different part of a capitalist circuit. There's one that I just made up called The Humans, which is just me kind of trying to think about, in a larger sense, what is the boundary between a human and the rest of the world. So we'll have figure like a man or like a woman, but we'll have like porn, then we'll have like cocaine, so like we'll have these very loosey uh you know s- uh blurry lines between what's a human, what's technology, what are the modifications we make to the world outside of us, and what are the ways in which we modify ourselves.
Can I like one thing that I'm very curious about? There's this, you know, talk about how a lot of the models that are available are very biased and skewed, and you know, I don't think the public still understands that the data that is used is what informs what you get. And here you have a project where you are purposely making a biased data set in order to see things that you wanted to see.
Hmm.
Uh, um, and I wonder, like, how did you come up with that? Like, did you have the experience of using the data set be like a let's say a generic data set, and it wasn't going to where you wanted it to go, and so you had to like counter engineer, like retro engineer, in order to get to where you wanted to go? Can you tell us about that, like that moment before you jumped into the mess of building models and all that work that needs to be done to do what you did?
No, yeah, completely. So you're absolutely right. Like the premise of this project was looking on one hand at data sets and models and thinking about the ways in which they are uh, the theory of visual perception that underlies them is very crude, and so that's one part. We've talked about that a little bit, and the second part of it is this question of bias, right? In other words, that like because visual perception is historical and is cultural and is subjective, is political, like there is always a point of view built into them, right? And so because of that, they're always going to be quote unquote bias. Now, that bias is a feature, not a bug. It is impossible to remove that bias
Yeah.
because seeing and naming and labeling and classifying is always coming from a point of view. There's no place outside of that. And so I thought, okay, well, let's run with that. Like, so let's consciously make models that embrace different points of view, like different historical points of view,
Yeah.
and to, you know, on one hand, kind of critique the, you know, wrong assumptions that were being built into so much machine learning and still are, but then
Mhm.
also as a way to try to be more generative and create models that were like artworks in a way. Like,
Yeah.
what if you translated like a 16th century allegorical print into a machine learning model, and
Mhm.
instead of being something that you look at, it's something that you look through,
Yeah.
right? So these are kinds of things that I was thinking about.
Yeah. And it, one thing that you also made me aware of is, I mean, I saw it, but you something that you said in one of our conversations about how we have now this, just like photography created this, tangent in visual culture,
Mhm.
we have a tangent in visual culture based on people that are not visually literate, if that is even a word,
Mm-hmm.
in terms that they see data. They
Mm-hmm.
don't
Yeah.
see the nuances of what it means to see,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you have we now are heading towards a decade of image generation based on a new understanding of how images are images.
Mm-hmm.
And these are images as data, not
Mm-hmm.
images as something you feel or you think about. They're data.
Yeah.
They're like flat. Uh, this is like a whole new tangent. We don't even understand the consequences of these first 10 years of this new tangent we're on, and where this is going to end up in 20, 30 years of flat data image generation.
Yeah, you're pointing to a very deep question that is like what I'm spending all of my time thinking about right now, which is that you're right, like there is like they are coming from this data thing, they're coming from a data pipeline that is the method through which they're created, you know, similar to, you know, language models, what have you.
Yeah,
But we don't perceive them as such, right?
yeah,
So in other words, like so you have this weird aesthetic that's being created that is then retroactively rewriting a bunch of previous aesthetics. So for example, you know, when you know Midjourney and these kind of newer models started coming out, it sort of retroactively rewrote science fiction art in my head, like you know, a lot of like neon kind of synth wave, like there's whole genres of art that I loved, you know, that sort of got retroactively turned into AI art, right?
yeah.
And so that was like kind of step one. Step two, I think is happening right now where it's getting really weird. Um, did you see did you see the whole debacle about the photo in quotes of the girl in the canoe holding the puppy in the aftermath of the hurricane?
Oh, I
You know what
did
I'm
not
talking
see that.
about?
No,
Okay. So there's a in
the
you know
mother.
there's these terrible hurricanes in the US,
Yeah,
and there you know obviously there's a big political you know divide there.
yeah.
An image went viral of a little girl in obvious distress holding a puppy sitting in the back of a canoe kind of covered in water. There you go.
Oh, yeah.
And it was being shared on social media mostly by the right wing saying like, oh, look at the terrible Biden response to the hurricane. The image was fake, right? And even when it was pointed out to the politicians that were sharing this, that this was AI generated images, they're like, we don't care. This feels right, right?
Oh my god.
So what is that moment in time where the photograph becomes an imaginary object, right? That's new. That's new in photo. Like that's not a photograph. That's a painting. But we're using the aesthetics of photography to
Yes.
generate these images that we've been shared. So that's weird. And then like, you know, this almost day by day, you think about like the Donald Trump in the McDonald's. You know, I don't know if you saw that
Yeah.
publicity. That looks like an AI image, even though it's real, right? So, what are all the ways in which these kind of this world of generated images and the kinds of emotions they're designed to elicit in us, or the kinds of truth claims that they're trying to make, actually then become embodied in you know, I've been saying for a while like JD Vance is a living deepfake, right? You know. Anyway, but this is
Maybe.
speaking. This is like very contemporary, but these are
Yeah.
the sort of things that I think both of us have been thinking about for a while, and sort of with this project was sort of trying to see into this future
Yeah.
where the rules and are get really changed. You know, I think a lot about some of the most iconic images that we have, or photographs particularly. Think of that the Napalm Girl.
Yeah.
Think of the Abu Ghraib images.
Mhm.
If that kind of image came out tomorrow, you'd interpret it completely differently,
That
right?
is true.
You know, is there a particular relationship to photography in particular that has been broken or changed or
Mhm.
morphed into some kind of imaginary kind of space, which it always was, but we did still have that little link to the outside world in the moment of the photon coming in and exposing the photosensitive,
It,
substrate.
is it like we both we the three of us lived through that moment when Photoshop became the destroyer of truth in photography, right? This feels like a second contemporary cycle of photography's, difficulty of being indexical and documentary. I mean, it's never been, but
Yeah.
let's say in the public perception of photography as a mechanism of truth. Um, but this feels very different. No,
Yeah.
there's an extra layer because it just doesn't it you can manipulate a photograph, but there's something different in generating an image that looks like a photograph.
Mhm.
What changed? What do you think changed us? Or what are AI images doing to us that we're going into this new way of thinking and doubting images?
It's really interesting, and like this is a big conversation. It's something we've
Yeah,
been
sorry.
writing about. I think, like, to peel it back a little bit, like, we're here at a photo fair. The photography as a discourse and as a set of institutions has been very slow to recognize, this computer vision, AI, like, the ironic thing is AI is made out of photographs, right? Like, this is like,
Exactly.
it is literally made out of photographs. You
Yeah,
know?
exactly.
And so it's been a little bit awkward to be in these environments that are completely dedicated to photographs and not talking about, like, hey, this is how they're actually functioning now, you know?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, this is when people ask me like, why are you so, vested in AI and images? I'm like, it's absolutely a consequence of 200 years of this hegemonic rule of photography looking at the world through photographic images.
Mhm.
And what I mean, it almost feels inevitable that we would build this machine that reads these trillions of garbage images that we will never see ever. There's no human that's going to see the trillions and trillions of images we've produced and are wasted in hard drives and, you know, are just sitting there. Like this machine system feels inevitable. And maybe that's being a little bit maybe tech positive here about it, but there are challenges to it, right? But it does feel like a consequence of photographic vision.
Mhm.
It's completely tied to it, and so that's why I think it's super important for photographers to ask the questions like, if now our images can be condensed and synthesized into these new images, then what is photography?
Yeah.
Like what does it mean to photograph, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And so, like, weirdly, these are the questions that, like, animated this project when I started making it. Was thinking about, like, if technical images, we'll use the word technical images instead of photography because we're moving into this world that, like, who knows what's what, right? But I think we would probably both agree that, like, a machine, AI generated image has something to do with photography, something more akin to photography than it does to a painting on a wall. Like, not an image of a painting on a wall, but, like, literally the painting
the
on the wall,
painting, yeah.
right? And so the that yeah, that question then becomes, what world of technical images are we building? And as a consequence of building that, are we imagining ourselves into and hallucinating ourselves into, right? And for me, this project was a way to take that seriously and kind of just take that by the horns and be like, okay, let's be conscious about this, right? And think about how we want to do this.
Cool. Yeah, maybe please, Alejandro, please.
One last question, and then I'll let you, John, take over. How you've talked about the process of how you were painting the images within the Latenscape, which for me felt fascinating, that you were digging within this black space, this black box, and saying, okay, neuron so number, let's see how that looks within this model that you've created. Tell us a little bit about that process and how you understood that that was a way to see within the model.
So I want to just take a step back and talk about the fact that the first version of this project came out in 2017. That first version was like 12 prints on the wall of a gallery, right, with titles, and it was not the forms that I was working with, traditional galleries, museums, and things like that, could not actually show what the project was, right? And so working with you guys at Fellowship and kind of working with the platforms that you've been building has been an opportunity to really show the scale of the project and to show a lot of the thinking behind the project in a way that it's never been able to be shown before. So to me, it's been really exciting because it really does feel like the project is being shown properly for the first time working with you. And so there's much more to it. There's a bunch of different models, obviously thousands, we had 1,000 images. One of the side quests that I was going on as I was doing this work is I wanted to see what was inside the black boxes, right? With the models are famously opaque and you can't audit them and you can't see what's going on inside of them. But if you rewind the clock to 2015, 2016, and you're building all your own stuff essentially from scratch, like, yeah, you can build it however you want. So you can, there's a lot of options that you had back then, paradoxically, that you don't have now. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was build a tool that would allow us to use any place in the model at all as a discriminator. So instead of saying, like, draw me a picture of an orange or draw me a picture of a dog, I could say, draw me a picture, pick a point on layer 5 in, the deep layers and show me what's going on at neuron number 94732 and use that as a discriminator, as a way to try to synthesize images of the kinds of things that were going on in the deep layers of the model. And we made a small collection of those for the project with Fellowship that we're calling Neurons, and you're seeing animations of various points in the inside of the deep layers, evolving images of sorts.
Yeah.
Wow. No, thank you very much, Trevor. It's I think we could stay for hours, to think about it. I think people starting listening to what you say start to think about what the hell is going on actually also, because basically when I think I really like the fact that you're mentioning the different phases of basically the way we are seeing the world through images, but now we have another bias on top of it, that are social media. So bringing one more way to interpret images. The example of the little girl with the dog also is you have everything that makes things pretty totally different from what we used to have, because it's expressing an idea. Basically it's just basically we always had this one image worth 1,000 of words basically, but now people, instead of writing what they think, just creating an image, pretending it could be true, but it's just a potential true. And that's enough to basically making it almost like as true as a fact, basically. And on top of it, algorithms are basically favorism. Another kind of AI is also pushing this kind of content on top of the people's mind.
Exactly.
I don't know. Yeah, images talking to algorithm. Then yeah,
talking to dopamine in our brain.
exactly.
I mean, the amount of data that the social media algorithms have on us. I mean, we are suckers to those algorithms. They understand us fully. Like, we've been feeding them for so many years text and images of what we see and what we want to see, when we feel happy, when we don't. They know us. These algorithms, it's crazy.
That's super crazy. And actually, I showed them an extract of a video you've been doing with Vice.com, I think in 2017. I recommend people to see it also. It's very, very simple, 5-10 minutes, but the way, the illustration are pretty nice also about exactly this relation also with social media and the way everybody at the moment decided to give everything about themselves for free, basically, to all these platforms. And that's pretty crazy, when you think that 10 years before everybody was paying to get this kind of data. So that's pretty strong. But just to because I know you guys also have a lot of things to do because Paris Photo VIP is opening tomorrow. So for collectors at 11 a.m. and then for VIPs at 2 p.m. So tomorrow on November 6th, and then you have the public opening on November 7th. So really recommend you to go and see the exhibition there. I think Alejandro started to share also some sneak peeks on social media, and just it's just on the collector side. The artwork are already available on daily, Alejandro, right?
Yes. Any questions that any collector has, just send us a DM or an email at hello@fellowship.xyz. We're offering prints, and some pieces have NFTs. So it's
okay. So basically people can buy just the print if they want to.
Yes.
So going basically contacting you or going to the booth and paying fiat currency, basically.
Yes.
And on the other hand, some other people, if they want to, they can buy an NFT edition.
Correct.
And on top of it, have the print, right?
Yes. Exactly.
So everybody's happy.
Yes.
That's super interesting. And also, I believe it's a good way, to touch both audiences. I think, Alejandro, with your experience, of both of you, what would you say, when you're going to this kind of event, it's like in terms of audience, is it a 50-50 in terms of people collecting work, or you have more digital collectors, or I would say traditional photography collectors who are interested by this work?
I would say still the fairs, the goers to fairs, they're looking for physical objects. The 3 times that we've been at the fair, we've had a good experience selling prints. So we think that is, let's say, an easier way for people to approach these new images and new technologies is via a traditional print medium. It's even last year when we were selling the Elman Mansimov works, I would say 99% of the sales were physical objects, and 1% were curious collectors from the digital, from the Web3 space that ended up at the fair and did buy NFTs, but it's still heavy skewed towards the physical object.
Yeah, I believe it. To be fair, it totally makes sense, because when you are behind your screen, minting an NFT is okay, because this is the best way to get it as fast as possible. But when you're going to the IRL world, it makes more sense, to leave the place with your IRL object, I believe.
Yeah.
And actually, this is on my personal, as I'm organizing also a fair, but more focused on Web3 natives, I would say. even with this crowd, the best sellers are physical artwork at the end of the day. Because even for people who are used to have a wallet and are doing minting, whatever, when they are going to IRL event, they will be more seduced by, living with a physical edition.
Yeah.
Because they know that the online stuff, they can do it at any moment when they will be behind their laptop, basically.
Yeah.
So-
It's still a big challenge, and I think 2020 and 2021 was a big push to make people consider digital ownership, but we're still a long way to go in that front.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's it's an interesting thing, and if you think about it, an interesting coincidence that generative AI started kind of at the same time when NFT and digital ownership was conceived. So you have these two parallel technologies, AI, generative AI, and blockchain ownership happening at the same time. So there's something interesting there. If you want to push a little bit the idea, there is something that unites these two technologies.
Yes, and at the end of the day, we know we have not mentioned that, but yeah, at the moment, the provenance question will make sense, I believe, to understand, which layer from where it comes and where it's ending up. So yeah, a lot of points, and I agree with you, but maybe it's one other talk that we will have later.
Yes.
I just wanted to thank you a lot, Trevor, for being there. Thank you, of course, Alejandro. So for people who will be in Paris, the fair is running until November 10th, I think, on Sunday. And for people who have not the chance to go to Paris, you can just go right now on the daily.xyz website and find the artworks and already means the ones you want to enjoy.
Yeah.
So yeah, have a great day. Just for people, tomorrow we'll still have we're going ahead with this special Paris photo editions, and we will have the chance tomorrow to have more galleries and artists who's joining, because we will be with Jack Butcher actually and Marlène Corbin from La Collection. So I believe also it will be super interesting, because the work he's presenting is also a bit different from what he used to do. And so I invite you to come tomorrow if you want to follow it live at 9 a.m. or then it will be in the platform on November 6th, basically. So have a great fair, have a great evening, enjoy, and good morning.
You, John. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Happy, really happy to be with you, happy, really happy to be with you.